question is desire free? And I'm now thinking about the relationship between desire and will.
Free Will and Determinism, Part 2, today on In the Shadow of the Cross. Welcome to another episode of In the Shadow of the Cross. I am Lauren Rosser. Last week, we began an interesting debate between Mark Karris and Thomas J. Oord on free will versus determinism. So this week, we're going to continue with part 2 of that debate. Enjoy.
Tom, I'm concerned that I follow a lot of where Mark's going in that, of course, but I'm concerned that we are removing something essential. And the analogy that popped into my head was that you and I, we all have a social contract that when we're driving on the streets and we see a stop sign, we stop. I don't feel like my freedom's inhibited. I feel like those things are there for purposes and reasons that are necessarily beyond me, you know. But I'm concerned that so let me put it this way: the upshot of Mark's perspective leads, in my view, to deep compassion and empathy. The upshot, in your view, leads to deep forgiveness and reconciliation. In other words, if you have free will, if I believe you have free will and you did something to me, I'm not going to necessarily feel compassion and empathy for you because I don't have that viewpoint, but I can forgive and be reconciled, where if I have Mark's viewpoint, I can do Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They're clueless. You know, I hate to say they're all from L.A., but they might be, you know. That was a joke. Mark's going, wait, I'm from San Diego. That's right below L.A.
Right.
It's okay. I'm from Orange County.
Okay.
Nice.
So anyway, Tom, can you come back and come give us this other perspective here?
Yeah, I think Mark is going to probably want to say that he's going to encourage at least some of his clients to forgive those who hurt them.
Of course.
The question would be, is that forgiveness something they freely do, or are they determined to forgive by something in their history?
They determine.
And if he's consistent, he's going to say it's determined. I do think it's interesting to listen to Mark's language.
Right.
He quickly admits that he's not going to tell a victim of rape that the rapist was determined to rape, let's say it's a female, to rape her,
Right.
because he just wouldn't think that would be a kind thing to say. So
Right.
he wants to say, I think I know the way the world works. We're all determined. But I don't want to tell people that in some instances because it'll be debilitating. It will be harmful to them.
Of course.
And there's actually lots of research in psychology that says people are more likely to improve their lives if they think they're free than they're determined. So what Mark is going to do is he's going to say, for the good of my client, I'm going to pretend like things haven't been entirely determined. And because I don't know the future, so he's got a strong epistemic openness to the future. I can't know where this is all going to go out, but I believe everything's determined. So the future is going to be laid out in the way that's already been settled somehow by the past. I just can't know it. I think that's a way of looking at the world that undermines Mark's own practice of working with at least some clients, in which he's going to encourage them to make choices to live differently. Whereas my perspective, which says, yes, we're always influenced by our past, and the rapist might have had a horrible past that inclined but didn't determine the rapist to do the horrible act, and my client might also have a horrible past that inclined her to whatever, but neither of them are entirely determined, and we can make some free choices moving into that open future. Not because I know for certain that everything in the past has been influenced and not determined, but I've got a proposal on the table that I think not only makes better sense of the past, but also the feeling of choice in the present and the openness of the future.
There's so much we agree on here. I think that
This is what I find fascinating.
there's so much we agree on. I just think the poking at how I am with a client, it doesn't work because I'm committing the act of beneficence. As a therapist, I know a lot of things, and I could cause harm even if something is truthful by telling them something in moments where they're not ready to receive it. Maybe as an analogy, being parents, we know a lot of things. We know a lot about how the world works. I'm certainly not going to tell my 7-year-old about some of these harsh truths and realities. So I think it's unfair to make that point. I think that if I was pressed, well, Mark, do you believe, if a victim, do you believe he was or she was determined? I would say I just phrase it differently. I wouldn't be an asshole. Yeah, he was determined. They couldn't help it. And of course, I would say, well, when I think about it, and I think about, I could use a murderer, a rapist. Again, I'm always under the presupposition that if I was in their shoes to the degree that I've had all their experience, etc., I would have done the same thing. If I was born 350 years ago, even sooner in a particular location, I would have been a staunch racist, right? It's just that's how determinative factors work. We can't escape our present reality because of that. I would just say, I think it's true that if we looked at that person's life and what they've been through and their genetics and their temperament and their prefrontal cortex, as they look at brain scans of serial killers and et cetera, and look at all of these variables, it would make sense how they came to be the kind of person they became. Now, in that, of course, it's a much more compassionate way of saying they're determined. But if I was pressed, which I never have and I never will be, because it's too much of a hypothetical, that wouldn't be real. But again, some people can go to that place after some hard work of empathy. Even as Christians, there's a point of being able to forgive the most heinous of crimes that people have committed. There can be a place where we can develop empathy and forgiveness because, if not for the grace of God, there go I, or however people frame it, there's a sense of understanding how sin, you could say that frame, how sin affects us all and how sin may have affected that person. And so I don't think it's way off the charts there. But everything about open and free, and of course I would encourage my client to have choices because I don't know what choices they're going to be able to make or not. Like I said, some can't make those choices due to everything that preceded the seconds and moments before me sharing information.
Question.
Can
Tom.
I say one other thing I agree with?
Oh, yeah, please.
One quick thing. If I agree with Mark that it's hard to have empathy for, let's say, a rapist, since we're using that instance. It's hard to have good empathy for a rapist if you think that rapist had unlimited freedom. But again, my view says that rapist was influenced. And I can look at the rapist and say, I can see why rape would be tempting in this particular situation, because if I was in that situation and had that same background, it would be tempting for me too. So I have the empathy element as well. I don't have a sort of, he could have done anything he wanted in his life because he just always makes randomly free choices.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
Yeah. So the question I have then now is, I'm made a note to myself here. I think, Tom, I can work with your definition of free will, and I can also work with Marx. But I understand Marx as the question is desire free, and I'm now thinking about the relationship between desire and will. Now, I don't want to rehearse the history of that philosophy. Oh Lord, let's just talk Hegel for an hour. Okay, but it seems to me that that's part of the crux and the difference between you two, if I'm hearing this right. I'm right there with Mark about there is no free desire. It's all influence. But I'm also hearing you about free will, and I want to know about the relationship of will and desire. Tom, help me out.
It's a super complex one, because in the philosophical literature, what some people mean by desire is the same as free choices, and others want to make a distinction. If desire means our what's a good synonym for desire?
Right, right.
Our aims, our hopes, our
Wants,
wishes, our
wants.
wants. Yeah. If that means, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. If those wants are understood as not being influenced by anything, then I'm against that view. I think desires are always shaped by our background,
Right.
by our past experiences. I'm
Right. So it's
100%.
determined. Thank you. Goodness, Tom.
Desire, desire is. Now, Mark, he's giving. Listen, Tom's giving you and I a ton of space here to play in, and I'm going to take all that I can get.
Right.
So he's affirming that desire is not free, but I think we want to now connect that. So go ahead, Tom. Connect that to your understanding of will,
Yeah. Well, before I get there, let me say that
or however you want to do it.
let me say that I purposely use the word shape instead of determine. And
Ah,
Mark might want to use those as synonyms, but I
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
make a
yeah,
distinction between the two.
yeah, yeah.
So, in terms of a will, I don't think we have a will as a substantive thing in our brain or our body somewhere. I
Hmm.
don't think it's a mechanism somewhere in here. I think will is just the way that people have tried to talk about these choices that we all seem to
mm-hmm,
be making. So
mm-hmm.
I don't want to sort of have to defend a definition of a will as a thing in a mind or a body. I don't think that really
Right, right,
works.
right, 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 right. That would just be boring anyway.
So if I don't have to do that, which I think is,
No faculty psychology here, folks.
yeah,
No,
that's
no.
right. Yeah. So if I don't have to do that, I think we just return to our fundamental disagreement about free choices and whether or not those are
Yeah.
genuine or not. So I don't think, to put it another way, I don't think the hashing through the particularities of desire and will is going to get us any closer to a resolution between Mark and me. um,
Right,
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 right.
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Because a desire,
I'm,
can I just make that one point, Michael, if I can?
oh yeah.
It goes back to what I said before. However, you want to define will, and I can understand desires. We have desires to be loved, to belong, to eat, to experience and embrace. All desires make sense. Will, if we consider it the inner choice maker, however you want to understand that, like I said before, determinism is occurring because that inner choice maker is determining what you're going to do next. So at the end of the day, but notice how not free you are. Because if I said, hey, you with your free will, I want you to choose to be completely happy today and be blissful. How about that? It's just not going to happen. We are, but Tom would agree because the freedom is limited. But I would just say that inner choice maker, it is constructed. My inner choice maker in the same grocery store is going to choose different products for different reasons, but it's still determining, and it still have been determined by that which has preceded before it. How will become these kinds of people who are making these choices in this particular moment?
Let's ask this question: is free will innate or is it given? So, for example, Cheryl will say to me, in the early afternoon, "What would you like for dinner?" Now she's given me total freedom, as I understand freedom, to decide what I want for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, in that sense, freedom is given to me,
Mm-hmm.
but is it necessarily innate? You see the question I'm starting to ask now. I'm wondering if we can. I'm trying to play this stuff out all in terms of
Yeah.
mimetic theory in my head while we're talking. Because I'm seeing congruences and inconsistencies.
Yeah, I
Tom,
suspect you're asking that of me, since Mark doesn't have the same view of freedom as I do. Um, I think that freedom is essential. So maybe innate is a good word. Moment by moment,
Mm-hmm.
and that God necessarily empowers us to make free choices. However, and this is what I've been saying over and over,
Mhm.
those freedoms are always in context. And so when your wife says, "Oh, what would you like for dinner?" You were free before she asked you that question, but now you have new variables on the table that are going to influence your freedom in the next moment. So
Mm-hmm.
questions, past histories, all those things are always going to be taken into account moment by moment
Mhm.
that condition the kind of free choices you have. When she asks you that question, she's not asking, "Do you want to eat simultaneously in Mexico City and in Toronto?" Because that's just not possible to do. So there's inherent in the questions, there's going to be some options that aren't even on the table. But
Hey,
there's
dude, I'm into the quantum thing, man. There's like 11 of me hanging out in here. Believe me, I could do shit.
Nice.
Okay, I want to take this now as we kind of move toward closing. I want to take this into the realm where it's important to our audience, and that's the discussion of quote unquote salvation. You freely choose. You're elected. You're determined. Mark,
Mm.
if you took your psychology
Yes.
and you turned it into a theology, you'd be a hardcore Calvinist on the doctrine
Oh
of
gosh,
election.
they would soak me up.
Thomas, we take your viewpoint, and you are a hardcore Pelagian or an Arminian on this topic. Gentlemen, these two have never mixed in the history of the church, but how is there any way I mean, Jim's audience, my audience, Lauren's audience, what we want to know is, are we saved? Do we make the choice? Do we have to have input? What do we do? Right? Or does God just do it all and we just sit back and, like it's a lifetime is a hot tub or something? I don't know.
Mhm.
So I've asked Tom the last one. Mark, I'll have you as the Calvinist. We're just going to call you Turretini or one of those guys.
Yeah.
Cookcheus. You could be Cookcheus. I mean, you could be anybody, but go ahead.
Listen, what can the potter say to the clay? I mean, some are before the foundation of the world are hell bent, and some are heaven bound. So yes, I'm a hard cop. No, I'm not at all. To integrate this, I could see how Calvinists would love what I'm saying today.
Tom is wiping his eyes.
Yeah, someone's balloon just burst right when he retracted that.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I tend to take again a more grassroots, down to earth level. Think about the trajectory, the over 35,000 Christian sects and denominations, the different choices that people are making. How have people become the kind of person who lifts their hands up to Jesus and says yes, while many can hear the same message and say no. I just think there's a lot of determinative variables that bring us to those very points and those divergent sets of experiences. But to frame it around God talk is a little difficult for me. I'm sort of taking a
Right.
little sabbatical from theology. But if I was to think about this, I wouldn't take the sort of even the biblical understanding of a God out there sort of making these decisions of who's going to go where and so for me, more of a panentheistic understanding and framework where there's this moment to moment experiences as nature unfolds, divinity unfolds within the fabric of reality, that at the end of the day, people are going to make their choices depending on which became previously before that. Because God couldn't be an asshole. And while I've had people crying out to God to want to be saved and want to live this kind of Christian life, and crickets. They couldn't feel God, and they wound up, going their own direction as a life apart from God. That's not God doing that. I just think given all the variables that have occurred before people are experiencing this, they became the kind of people they became.
Yeah, and I'm guessing, but it's only a guess, that you would be closer to someone like Einstein than you would to Heisenberg.
I'll take both.
But either God plays dice or God doesn't play dice.
God plays dice or doesn't play. Yeah, God definitely plays dice. Oh my gosh, God doesn't know. God doesn't know. It's all a risk.
Tom.
I agree with Mark that God doesn't know, so we'll start there.
Yeah.
Before I tell you my position, I'm realizing that Mark has a pretty interesting position here, at least as I understand him, and he can correct me.
Yeah.
Maybe one that I've never heard before. And it says something like
Yes.
this: God doesn't determine our salvation, but the world does. We don't choose it freely, but God doesn't force us either. But we're determined by something in our past or histories. And I can't think of an example of that. Usually people who think that we're determined by our past don't have God in the picture, but Mark still has at least some version of
That's
God.
correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's got a new theory as far as I can tell.
Let's write this
God
down.
doesn't.
Let's get a paper.
Yeah, that's right.
I've
Right
already
here.
written it down. I wrote it down.
But let's
God
give
doesn't
it
determine our salvation. The world does.
We need a
what's
name for
excellent
this.
is well, it's a mimetic theoretical viewpoint. It's the way I talk about it too. I love that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, as a Christian theologian, at least, I have to say, God does determine God's self to be for us, which is the very Bartian viewpoint of election. God determines God's self to be for us, so that's a determination that is for our salvation. Rather than God determining who's saved and who's not, God determines in God's self to be for us. To be
the essence of love.
Michael,
Tom.
wouldn't you have to say, though, if your position has a God who makes a determination to be for us, and let's say you have something like a classic view of God's power, maybe you don't, but let's say you're like Bart and you do.
I don't, but go ahead.
Okay.
No, I have no. I don't. I really don't. I have a very robust theology of the cross that basically says the cross negates Deus ex machina, it negates interventionist gods, and it negates any god of power.
Okay. Well, let me ask you then one quick question before I make my statement. Do you think God created the world? The universe.
I'm going to say no. I'm going to give an unequivocal yes to that.
Okay.
So I'm going to say the natural nature, the natural world, not civilization.
So your God made a decision to create a world that would then determine some for salvation and some not to experience salvation.
No. All are determined for salvation in my world.
Oh, okay.
God determines to be for all people, in other words. The emphasis is on God's determining God's self to be for all people, rather than God up there picking and choosing who gets to go and who gets to go.
Okay, yeah. So let me say it differently. Your God made a world in which there was no freedom, and at least the way I want to talk about freedom, and that the rapist was determined to rape the victim, and the Holocaust was determined through desires, etc. Your God made that world so that everything was going to play out in a particular way it does, and yet your God is a loving God. That's a weird view.
It is only.
Oh, we're crucifying Michael now.
No, it's all good. No, because this is good. This is good.
Yeah.
We've opened up a whole other wonderful can of worms about the relationship between the Creator, omnipotence, power.
Yeah.
See, for me, those are categories that the cross abrogates entirely. I see the Creator as, in the two great moments, the Genesis myth and the Calvary story, as where the Creator gives up all power to the human being. The Creator has given up power, and so my God has no power.
Gotcha. Oh, well, that helps then. Yeah. So then, is salvation determined in the creating, or is at the end God going to take up that power again and give salvation to everybody?
Yeah, I would say from an exegetical, at least from a Christian exegetical viewpoint, it's both from the beginning, the Lamb slain before the foundation of the world. It's also at the end. So, like, for example, Tom, when I read the Genesis myth, I don't see Genesis, the first Genesis narrative, 1 through 2:4. I don't see that as protology. Genesis 1 through 2:4 is eschatology because it goes through 7 days, right? Genesis 2:5 in the second narrative, you never leave day 6. Right, you're just there after that forever. So I don't read the first narrative as protology, but as eschatology, and then the second narrative is protological.
All right. Well, I'm steering us into a whole nother realm.
Yeah, free will,
You are,
determinism.
if you'd like to come back, if this was fun for you,
Yeah, let's do it.
We could do
Well,
this. We could do this.
Let me quickly try to give an answer to your salvation
Please.
question, and then we can save that other one for another day. I'm really a lot like John Wesley's view of salvation here. So not only do I think we have a free choice in our salvation to respond to God's empowering call, inspiration, but Wesley also emphasized that salvation was something we can start to experience now. So it's not, he didn't dismiss the afterlife, but he placed the importance on the present life.
Right.
And I think that's crucial in this whole discussion, because I do think, as I've said so many times, we make freedom in context, and those freedom can increase or decrease our experience of salvation in the present. And that's one of the reasons it's important, as I see it, to believe in free will.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, Lauren and Jim. Jim?
I've really enjoyed this. I think this has been good.
Yeah.
But I
Are you saying that out of free will, or were you determined?
I'm going to vote determined.
I'm going to vote freely.
I have a line of questions I want to ask both of you. The past maybe 30 years, maybe a little bit longer, the studies that go into the influence of the heart as the little brain or whatever, the 40,000 neurons of the heart that influence our decisions, that they retain deeper memories. However we want to approach that or say that, if, as you're saying, Mark, the influences of my social structure, my family of origin, my influencers, I am, especially at a very young age, I am interpreting the things that I experience without the tools that I need to be able to interpret them. I'm turning everything into myself, how it affects me. Case in point, a father abandons his family. And I'm going to interpret that as how it affected me, and probably go somewhere with what I did to influence my father to leave. Okay. Now, as I start growing, more things are happening in my life, and I'm locking into my heart or whatever. I'm locking into that both freedoms and limitations. So, I'm 12 years old. My father, who's a physicist, is yelling at me because I can't figure out a very simple math problem. And I'm now determining that anything having to do with math, I will never be able to approach that. At 16, I start learning about medical science and so on and so forth. And I start thinking, I would really love to become a pediatrician. And then I find out how much math is involved. And I'm like, okay, I don't have that choice anymore. I'm not free to make that choice because I've made a series of choices leading up to that tells me, no, math is involved. You can't do that. So I became a pastor instead. No. There's no math in pastoring.
No. How many people were in attendance? What was the collection?
I have a secretary for that.
Outsource.
Okay, so to that degree, I would say that I'm living my life either on the core premise of fear, things I fear, or I'm living it on the core principle of, I'm going to use the word love, although that's taken way out of context, but the things I love. And what makes the difference to me is that at some point in time, I come to realize that there is a benevolent God who really does love me and really gives me an opportunity to start making healthier choices for my life. Am I free to make those healthier choices, though, in light of the fact that my whole personality, everything has been shaped in the first 5-7 years of my life by the choices I made. And so I've actually predetermined the rest of my life. So am I really free to make choices after I come to the understanding that there is a benevolent God who, according to his scripture, tells me I can transform myself by the renewing of my mind and so on and so forth. So that would be a question I would want to introduce here to this conversation.
Jim, who would you like to reply first, Mark or Tom?
I think Mark, because I'll tell you why. Because he's from New York, because he works with Marines, and because he's a family counselor. I was pastoring in New York for 8 years, and I'm a Marine. Actually, I'm the head of our Marine Corps League here in our county. So, and besides that, Tom's got books behind him, and I don't know. He might be an
I'm sure
academic.
glad I don't have 6,000 books here in the house. No, not behind me.
I have Star Wars people behind me, so what does that mean?
We need to get a new moderator.
I'm fired.
Yeah, let's go with Mark and then over to Tom. I'd really be interested in hearing both your heart.
All of those books behind Tom determined how he would view and think and feel into the world. And given another set of library and another set of books, one would have came out very differently. But I digress. Zombie ex-pastor. But listen, you shared a lot of things, and I wonder if you can encapsulate it into a question. You said you shared some good things, but where does the question emerge? What are you trying to really ask?
If our family of origin, our social construct, from day one through the first 5 years of my life, if the choices, if you will, to respond to what has happened to me has shaped now the whole rest of my future, really. And we're not talking about choices to buy this fabric softener or that. We're talking, the course of my life. My question is, if it has determined, then do I have free choice? And a follow-up question to that is, if the God of the Bible offers to me the ability to begin to transform the quality of my life through the renewing of my mind, does that offer me free choice, or am I still limited by the construct of my first 5 years, or
Yeah.
family of origin, or social construct?
What just came to me? I was thinking as you were talking, Rick Warren, and I was so struck by his son who committed suicide, um,
Mm-hmm.
and the amount of help, the amount of biblical teaching, and all the sermons he must have heard, and um, the reality is that God is within the fabric of all of reality, and God is, I guess, wouldn't say one variable among many, though it's hard to separate completely because God is in whom we live, move, and have our being. But it's clear that even if God is in the picture and one has a relationship with God, it does not necessitate one become free, and that's due to the many variables that exist apart from God that person may have experienced, and neurochemistry, brain chemistry, and a whole host of variables that I can't even name. That So I say again, back to the therapy room and the example. I don't know who's going to be able to experience quote transformation, whatever that is, but for every fiber of my being, I love the people that I work with. I will always be hope filled because that's how I've been determined. That's my, I could have had a whole other different sensibilities and intuitions, but that's who I have become. And I'm grateful. I'm not arrogant or prideful because I have become the person who I became. It's just my set of variables, the unfolding of nature through me. And I'm just swimming. I'm swimming in nature as it's. So I guess I'm just saying I'm grateful for you that it seems like you've experienced very good, positive things. Even amidst, you mentioned the first 5 years, back to research, we know it has incredible amount of impact. The first 18 months, if we're going to attachment theory, how we are going to respond to others, our ability to regulate our emotions, our ability to have healthy relationships, our ability to have a positive view of self or the world. The first 18 months of existence will shape how someone relates to their partner 20 years later. It's incredible.
Yes.
And so I'm all for hope and transformation. I hope that you have and continue to do so. And you will continue to do so based on which came before this very moment and what comes after it. And every other input and variable
Okay.
becomes a new piece within this unfolding of reality to create different outcomes, which is really exciting. But I don't know what they are, even if they're to some degree determined, or we can say a large degree determined by everything that preceded it, this very moment.
Yeah, I would answer that question, Jim, by saying if you are entirely determined by what happened in the 12 years, first 12 years of your life, your later belief that God is giving you opportunities to be transformed is a false belief. It's an illusion. It's not true. If it's metaphysically true that you're determined by the first 12 years, then whatever you think in the future has also been determined. And if you think God is giving you free choices for transformation, if it's metaphysically true that you're determined, then your picture of God is false and you should give up that view of God. Now, of course, I think God does give you free choices for transformation, so I don't think you are entirely determined by the first 12 of years of your
Yeah,
life. But
I agree with you there. I wouldn't say otherwise.
I would think I would think if it wasn't for the God factor, we probably are, though.
let me throw something, and
Oh, I
I
see.
have said this before to you guys, and that's that when somebody says, they ask me, do I believe in free will? I say no, but I believe in freed will, that we can be freed, that we can see that from in my language that everything I want, I learn from somebody else's desires. Everything I want, it comes from somebody else's desires. the moment I can learn just to let those desires go, I'm free. I'm free to make choices that aren't determined, that don't determine me. I'm freed. So in that sense, do I believe in free will? No. But do I believe in free will? That's what I hear Tom arguing. Yes. So yeah, you guys. It's been an intellectual game of Twister for me today. I think I started the day with three tentative hands on Mark's side and one in Tom's. I now have two in Tom's, but the other two seem to be super glued to Mark's side.
So who wins? Who wins?
Who wins? I win. You know, I get to walk around with Twister on my body all the rest of my life, super glue.
I vote for Tom. I vote for Tom. In the spirit of love,
Lauren, I'm going to give you the last word here, buddy, and I want to first of all thank Mark and Tom. And but before you close, Lauren, Mark, you have a number of books. Which would be the book that a person that has really enjoyed today's conversation? Is there a book you have that might be kind of resonating with that?
No, because they're so free will oriented.
He writes what sells.
I mean, I have several books. I mean, on this topic,
correct.
Yeah, there's a book on prayer that's very free will oriented, conspiring with God. But yeah, I don't have anything on free will and determinism. But yeah, just pick up all of them.
Which book of pick up all of them? There you go, folks.
Yeah.
Mark is creating his retirement.
Can I end with a quote from Sapolsky?
Sure.
It is, and he writes this in his conclusion. It is the events of 1 second before to a million years before that determine whether your life and loves unfold next to bubbling streams or machines choking you with sooty smoke. Whether at graduation ceremonies you wear the cap and gown or bag the garbage. Whether the thing you are viewed as deserving is a long life of fulfillment or a long prison sentence. There's no justifiable deserve. The only possible moral conclusion is that you are no more entitled to have your needs and desires met than is any other human. That there's no human who's less worthy than you to have their well-being considered. You may think otherwise because you can't conceive of the threads of causality beneath the surface that made you you, because you have the luxury of deciding that effort and self-discipline aren't made of biology, because you've surrounded yourself with people who think the same. But this is where the science has taken us.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, if that's the science, I don't want to live in that moral world that he's created. It's so neoliberal. It's so like totally existential. It's just
give me an example.
World I would want to live.
Give me an example. Why? How so in practice?
So.
This is part 2 now. Another hour.
Well, no, because we got to close.
Okay. Sorry.
But if I follow Sapolsky at this point, I have no agency.
I don't know if you would say agency. Again, I don't
even have an ego. I don't have any way to self-reflect without it already being determined that I'm self-reflecting and how I'm self-reflecting. I have no consciousness.
That's so
worldview is it just
that's a caricature. Okay, go.
I don't know, Tom. Caricature, not. What do you say?
Well, I think Sapolsky would say you have consciousness, but he would just say your consciousness has been entirely determined by your past history. So,
yes.
Whether or not you have an ego, that's an interesting question. If an ego means some kind of free response to your environment, well, then I think Sapolsky has taken it away. But if it just means I think that I am making choices, but I'm really determined, well, then you're back to Mark's position.
Yeah, when I say ego, I'm referring to the part of me that can still remember yesterday I'm the same me, and the day before, I'm the same me. That there's that stream of consciousness through time.
Yeah, I think Sapolsky can give you that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Yeah. But I hear your point.
We've had Mark's last word, Tom, your last word. First of all, you have over 30 books. Do you have time to live a life? No,
Yeah.
you're a very prolific author, editor, and listen, Mark has books, I have books, Jim has books. We know that, like that meme that says, having a book, you got to like drag a knife through your chest to open it up to get it out, and that's a lot of surgery, Tom.
Well, I think maybe the book that addresses the free will issue in a way that's accessible to a wide audience would be the book called just simply Open and Relational Theology.
Brilliant book.
Subtitle is Introduction to Life-Changing Ideas. Oh, thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
In terms of last word, I don't have a great quote to give you like Mark's great quote. Yeah, maybe I'll just say I think the position that I've been trying to forward fits with the way that I and just about everybody live, although I admit that I don't know for sure that it's the correct view.
Well, my last word, I think, would just have to come as one of the best last words ever in a book.
It is finished now.
Rosie, Sam said, I'm home. Lord of the Rings. Look, gentlemen, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
This has just been wonderful. Lauren, you brought us in. Take us home.
Yeah, absolutely. But first, I have to say, when you, Thomas, when you said what your book was, the lights just came on, and I went, "Oh my gosh, this is Thomas Oord, whose book I've been reading."
Oh, really?
Awesome.
Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am?
Wait, did you? The Jesus something? That is too funny because I've been listening to an audiobook every time I'm doing the treadmill, and I was like, Open Relational Theology. I've been reading a book about that. This guy's really tuned into it, and I'm like, he's the guy who wrote the freaking book.
Oh man,
That's hilarious.
that's great.
I love it.
So this podcast will be called "Lauren is an Idiot." So anyway, I want to thank you guys both for being here, and I also love that this was such a great example of what good conversation can look like. Even on things that we disagree on or differences we have, we can still love one another and have fantastic conversation. And we need so much more of that in this world. It was so good. So healthy all the way around, and I really enjoyed it. Just like Jim was saying, I was like in the bleachers enjoying this one. That was a lot of fun, you guys.
Yeah. I told Cheryl this morning, Lauren. I said, this is my time to get an education. It is, and that's how I viewed this morning. I've got pages of notes here. I'm just like going, woo. So I want to thank you guys for starting the conversation. Carrying it on would sure be fun to continue this conversation, and there's so many arenas and places we could take it. For the regular viewer, Durkin, for the regular viewer, what's the takeaway? This is going to go at the beginning of the podcast next week, Dirk. So make it good.
Well, I think my foot is on the yellow circle, and my hand is on the green.
I know.
I think for the regular listener, I think this has been really eye-opening. Because we toss around terms and phrases, and that's what our whole podcast has been about. We have free will, and to listen to both of you and hear what you're saying. I get determination. I get that we're determined. I get that, at the same time, there's other factors, and free will is extremely limited. Why did I pick the woman that I picked to be married to now 52 years?
You better say
Why-
you did it intentionally, because I'm about to get married, and this was not like determined. I choose this. And Cheryl's listening;
It's
she's
both.
laughing.
I think we heard today it's both.
Yeah,
Compatibilism.
It was my choice, but she filled the bill of many things that were determined through my whole life of who I'm attracted to.
yeah.
So I think
We both win.
I think if somebody listened to this podcast and gets their head out of their rear end of religious,
They were determined to be there.
will. They were determined to be there. If they're willing to listen, I think anybody has been stretched in a really good way, and I love it. I'd love to have the two of you back on sometime and go further.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And my final word on this is I feel like it's the end of Forrest Gump, where he's the feathers floating and he says, I don't know if Lieutenant Dan's right. I don't know if Mama's right, about destiny or if we're all just kind of floating on the wind. And he goes, maybe both. and I kind of feel like that's the whole thing when we got one foot in one square, one in the other. It's kind of like maybe both, So
we shall live with this Kierkegaardian paradox until next time.
Yes. Well, thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, we'll talk to you all again next time.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you. See you later.